Good afternoon. Welcome to the snack program offered by the Rotary Club of Milwaukee each Thursday at noon. The snack program is different from our Tuesday program as it's less formal than the Tuesday programs. That is, no pledge, invocation, or club business. It will last about 30 minutes. Of course, you can still count on high quality programming and content. I like to think of the snack program as tastes great, less filling. Typically, we'll feature a member of Rotary or a Rotary connected organization with ideas pertinent to how we are living today. Today, we'll hear from Joseph Walzer of UW Milwaukee. Next week, please tune in at noon on Thursday as we welcome Ian Abston to discuss the Light the Hone initiative. Feel free to submit your questions via the chat button at the bottom of the screen. I will keep an eye out for them and share them with the speaker once the planned remarks are complete. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Joe. One of the things that distinguishes Milwaukee is that it has a long history. In 25 years, it'll be nearly 200 years old. There are a lot of histories of Milwaukee's first 100 years, but not enough for the next 100 years. Joseph Walzer is the project director of the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee and a lecturer in history and ethnic studies at UWM. He first joined the project as a graduate research assistant in 2013 and wrote over 30 entries for EMKE before his graduation with a PhD from UWM's history department in 2017. He specializes in race and ethnicity in urban history with an emphasis on Milwaukee. He's revising his dissertation, Making an Old World Milwaukee, German Heritage, Nostalgia, and the Reshaping of the 20th Century City for publication by University Press. So without further ado, here is Joe.
All right, hello everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. All right, it looks like, okay, there we go. All right, so thank you everybody for inviting me here today, and thank you Alex, and thank you to the Rotarians and our guests here today for inviting me to come talk about this great project. I'm really excited about this project, the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee. You know, this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Much of my family's from here, but I didn't grow up here. I actually grew up in Fond du Lac, which is about an hour and change north of here. But I've been living here since 2000, and this is my home. This is definitely my home now, and I've really come to love this place as my home. So, and its history, and I've made its history my career, and I don't regret a minute of it. So this is fantastic, and I love another part of what I love about it is being able to share it with you and everybody else who's excited about just even like little tidbits or broader strokes of the city's history. So this is a very exciting opportunity. So I have a couple things that I want to do today. Are my slides being shared here, or do I need to do that again?
You do need to do that again.
I will do that again. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. There we go. Can you see that now?
Yes. Okay,
fantastic. Great. All right, so there's a couple things that I want to do here today. First thing is I'm going to talk a little bit about the project itself, what's in it, how it was built too. This is over a decade-long project. Well, I mean, it's now 12, going on 13 years now. So, and then I'm going to talk a little bit with whatever time we have left from there. I know this is a shorter program, but I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that we've learned in developing the encyclopedia and some of the narratives that have kind of come out of this. And then hopefully there's some time afterwards for some Q&A, and we can start kind of diving into some of the things that you guys are interested in too. So what is the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee? Well, the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee is first and foremost your first stop for exploring Milwaukee's history. It's the first stop for anyone interested in learning more about the history of the Milwaukee and the Milwaukee area overall, and I'll talk a little bit about why that's important in just a minute. It's meant for researchers, students, and the general public. And it's a digital project, which makes it super accessible for everybody. Like I said, it has been built over the last 10 plus years at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in the history department. It was conceived of, and our two chief primary investigators on the project were Margot Anderson and Amanda Seligman. And then over time, they developed a partnership with Marquette University as well, and brought on Jim Martin and Tom Jablonski on to also be senior editors. We also had a board of several folks too, which I'll talk about in a little bit as far as their contributions. But we were also fortunate enough to have generous funding and support from the National Endowment for the Humanities in a big way, the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, and then UWM has been a really great home for this. They've devoted a lot of resources and bandwidth, literally and figuratively and literally for this project. So as a digital project, if you think about an encyclopedia, it takes up a lot of space, right? And it's definitely something that you have to go visit, in its physical form. But as a digital project, we're able to condense all of that into something that's super accessible for everybody. And so we were able to actually build something that had, over 700 entries, right? Or approximately 700 entries, offering comprehensive and authoritative coverage on a lot of the key people, places, events, and themes in Milwaukee history. And that's a lot, right? That ends up covering a lot. And we're actually finding, though, that it's not quite enough. So we've got some plans to expand on this here in the future. So these entries, though, they range from being short, specific entries on specific, people or places or events, or also broader thematic entries on things like outdoor recreation or weather, and those impacts on Milwaukee history and the contributions that Milwaukee has had to those themes. And as you can imagine, a project like this requires a tremendous amount of time and energy. So when I'm talking about bandwidth that UWM has offered, both UWM and Marquette has offered, it requires a ton of time and energy and a wide array of abilities to be able to put this together, right? To develop this. And it kind of explains why it's taken over a decade to make this thing a reality. It's required scholarly researchers. We leaned on scholarly researchers who have done a lot of scholarship on this, experts in particular fields and topics in urban history, both here specifically to Milwaukee, but also nationally. But also, and I think Alex kind of touched on this, that there's some blind spots here that we don't necessarily have scholarly research on, that we needed to be able to rely on local community experts. And there's some folks that you are probably familiar with. I mean, John Gerda, we're probably all familiar with John Gerda. He was a huge help in both conceiving of this project, but then also writing some of our larger entries. George Wagner, Carl Baer, Jans Marty, Ruben Harpole are just some of the folks that we were able to lean on for their expertise to be able to kind of help fill in some of the gaps in our scholarly knowledge. A little bit of something that we didn't really expect, but we're very happy to kind of discover along the way, is that this ended up becoming a fantastic opportunity for graduate students to be able to also start applying their training in researching and writing to be able to also help fill in a lot of these gaps in our knowledge and be able to start developing a basis for future scholarship. More than half of our entries were written by graduate and undergraduate students with the mentorship of faculty and staff. And so this has become a really fantastic professional development opportunity for students at UWM and at Marquette. So in addition to the actual entries, which are kind of like the basis for this encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee also has a media library, of over 1,300 paintings, photographs, postcards, and other images that are tied to a lot of the themes and entries themselves. We also similarly have a map library of currently around 50 maps. And then also in the last couple of years, we've been working to expand our capacities, first of all, for a digital bibliography of over 1,800 sources. And a lot of these sources are attached to specific entries, but also ones that have kind of come out since we've started conceiving of this project. And also we're working on developing a series of curriculum guides in collaboration with area teachers to help bring some of these stories that are brought out in the encyclopedia, and also some of the tools and resources that the encyclopedia can provide into the classroom, and make this a teaching and learning tool in addition to just being a kind of like a trivial resource or even a scholarly source in and of itself. We believe that the encyclopedia has an opportunity to have a major impact in bolstering local knowledge and local historic knowledge in our area classrooms. One of the things that we've really emphasized as we've developed this is transparency and engagement. So one of the key innovations, one of the things that makes the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee different from other digital urban encyclopedias, urban history encyclopedias, there are a few others out of Chicago. There's the Encyclopedia of Chicago, the Encyclopedia of Cleveland, and then there's one of our peer projects is the Encyclopedia of Greater Philadelphia, which is another fantastic resource. One of the things that we're able to contribute to this genre, this emerging genre of urban history encyclopedia, was the development of features that allow for greater transparency and community engagement. And this is a really important piece for making this a valuable resource for the Milwaukee area community. We really wanted to make it clear to our users, researchers, students, and the general public that this encyclopedic knowledge didn't just come down from on high, right? It wasn't told of in this ivory tower and then just kind of bestowed on all of us by learned folks, but it was a product of painstakingly thorough research, editing, and fact checking, right? That this was actually a process, a 10-year process, right? To be able to build this knowledge and to be able to offer it as an authoritative resource for the Milwaukee area. And so there's a couple of innovations that we developed along the way to kind of account for this. First of all, footnotes, which, just kind of seems like, well, yeah, duh, right? Like why, this is a scholarly resource, why not have citations? But I mean, if you go back through encyclopedias though, physical and digital, some of those resources are not as thoroughly cited. And so like what we wanted to do was not only just tell the story, but also show where we're getting this from. And so Keith was talking a little bit about the Journal Sentinel archives a bit, and that ended up throwing these footnotes in, for a loop, because there was a period where we were able to rely on the Google News archive that had a bunch of these sources from both the Milwaukee Journal and the Milwaukee Sentinel, and then it switched over to Newsbank. But like the idea was to be able to have these things available for researchers to be able to then kind of like follow our thinking down through this rabbit hole, and then be able to kind of assess for themselves where these narratives were coming from. The other piece were understories that are basically essays that our authors and other folks have written to kind of talk a little bit about how this research and writing process and this knowledge that we've produced came about, right? So we're trying to be very transparent and acknowledge this learning and research and knowledge as a process. And we also understand that a public history project like this relies heavily on community knowledge. And so there's folks in the Milwaukee area who know a lot more about these topics than some of us, right? And so actually that's how we were able to get in contact with Alex, right? And these over the transom kind of conversations have actually generated an incredible amount of local knowledge, and being able to contribute immensely to the authority that the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee is able to provide our readers and our users. So what have we learned along the way here? This is harder to see than it should be, but what is Milwaukee, right? And that's a really difficult conversation to have, because Milwaukee is so many things to so many different groups of people. It is a city, but it's also a metropolitan area, right? That relies on the hinterland for resources, and the hinterland relies on the city for resources, right? So it's these larger relationships. It's also contested space based on things like race and class and gender and systems of power and privilege. It's a safe place sometimes for some people and not so much for other people. It's also an environmental place too. So a lot of the stories that when you dive deep into the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee, it can be a rabbit hole, believe me, you're able to kind of discern and see the multiple different levels and the multitudes of what Milwaukee is, right? And that's a really fantastic opportunity. I think that I've given up my 15 minutes here. So I do absolutely want to allow for more time for questions and answers, and hopefully some of these stories of like what is Milwaukee will be able to come out of some of the questions that you have. So I hope that I've been able to kind of illuminate what the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee is, and how it can help all of us learn more about the city and what it has to offer.
Thank you, Joe. Gosh, I have a lot of questions, but hopefully other people will be sparked to submit some. The first question I have is, I was trying to do a little research into who keeps what around Milwaukee, and it seems like we have pockets of stuff about Milwaukee in many different locations: the UWM Library, the Milwaukee Public Library, the Milwaukee County Historical Society, maybe even the museum. It's sort of like, is there a catalog of where to find things? even just like, it seems like there's disputed territories between some of the two or three institutions. So how do you work with that?
Yeah, for sure. That is definitely a challenge. And that's kind of one of the things that we're hoping to develop the capacity to help people find those things, right? And like you say, there are many places that these things reside. Yeah, like you said, the County Historical Society, UWM, the State Historical Society, also through UWM as an area research center, the public library, the public museum, and then throw in all these little community, not so little community repositories as well. Waukesha County has a fantastic museum and archive there, and different community groups have developed kind of their own systems and places for storing things. That's kind of one of the problems with doing this kind of history is that it is so fragmented. What we're trying to do, what we've tried to do with the bibliography of Metropolitan Milwaukee, which came out as kind of like a preparatory project for this, and that's a hard copy. And then what we've kind of done in building then the bibliography that we have on the site is kind of like the addition to that, is to try to start collecting some of that knowledge. But that's mostly secondary sources. As far as like places to find primary sources or the actual like archival materials and that kind of thing, that requires kind of knowledge of those places. So I'm hoping that like through the contact us function, we're able to direct people to at least an archivist that will know what those records are. And it's kind of fascinating too how those fragmented things have come about, right? So I mean, you would expect that like Mayor Meyer's papers would be in among like the city archives, but he ended up giving it to UWM instead. And I think that there was a political decision in there somewhere.
So do all the institutions talk to each other and have a group that meets regularly to discuss these sorts of things? Or
that's a great question. And I think that I mean, there are informal relationships between all of the groups, and you know, perhaps Claire could speak a little bit more to this, being an intern in the archives at the International Institute. But the UWM's SOAS program and archives programs have actually produced quite a few of our archivists here in the area. So everybody pretty much knows each other, or at least knows of each other. So I think that there is knowledge of, you know, where things are. It's just a matter of directing people to the right, you know, to the right resources.
a question from Steve Chevalier. Could you talk a little bit more about access to this resource? And I think that ties into the larger question of how do you publicize this, and what can we do to help you?
Yeah, access to the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee, do you mean, or yeah. Well, yeah, we've been doing a pretty thorough job of trying to build a social media presence, and then also, and that's part of the other reason that we're building a curricular piece to this too, is trying to build a student base that can regularly use the encyclopedia as a resource. As far as like general public and researcher use, we're working very hard to get in front of librarians, but then also groups like you know, you in the Rotary Club, to be able to alert folks to this great resource, and word of mouth. You know, word of mouth is absolutely helpful. Sharing things on social media, but also, you know, saying like, hey, I learned about this thing in the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee. What's the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee? Like, well, it's this great resource. You know, that kind of thing is very helpful as well. So
basically you have to just Google Encyclopedia of Milwaukee, and then that's the portal to everything else.
a lot of our traffic is coming from Google these days, which is really fantastic. We've been able to optimize our search capacities, which is another thing. I being trained as a historian, optimizing search keywords and stuff like that, that kind of language is something that I had to learn by doing this project. So learn on the fly. So yeah, we've been getting a lot of traffic and consistent traffic. So I'm very happy to see that.
Question from Mary McCormick. If the Rotary Club of Milwaukee wanted to be included as one of the profile organizations, how would that come about?
One of the profile could you say a little bit more about what that means, being a profile organization, or to have an organization profiled in the Encyclopedia of Milwaukee?
Well, I just looked, when I was looking at your topics, one of them was organizations, and there were 75, and I haven't gone to look to see what those organizations are, but you know, we're an organization with 107 or 8 years of history, and we actually have a centennial book that we put together. So but anyway, I was just thinking about that. Our archives are at the UWM archive.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, let me take a look here.
Well, you don't need to answer it right now, but it's something to think about. But
that's a great question, and I think that so one of the areas that we want to expand is at least a thematic entry on clubs and organizations, right? And I think that the Rotary Club, of course, you know, as you know, has been integral to Milwaukee, as have like the Elks in different ways. And
our women's club at downtown Milwaukee is the oldest women's club in the country.
Yes,
and
yeah.
You know, but there are.
Yep, an entry on the women's club. So yeah. So I think that you know,
We'll send you our history and then we can follow up another time. We don't
that'd
need
be
to.
fantastic. Yeah,
Teresa said that she Googled and she found out that we funded an agent to patrol the city during Prohibition. That must be in the encyclopedia.
interesting. Wow. Okay.
So we saved the horses for the mounted patrol. That was in 1930 or 1932. So, yep.
Okay.
Another question from Steve. How did you decide to focus on the time period that you cover?
For the encyclopedia's time period is from native settlement here, or not settlement, like native existence, to the present. So so pretty much like when it's not just Milwaukee as Milwaukee, but also Milwaukee as a place with and even before that with natural history. We have an entire entry on the natural history of the area, talking about the glaciers and the Kettle Moraine, the development of the Kettle Moraine and the river systems. So we tried to be as comprehensive as humanly possible with time, to be able to contextualize the city, not just as like a social formation or a physical place with buildings, but also a place in the environment, right? That has environmental impacts and struggles and wildlife and resources and everything as well.
Are you a separate 501c3?
We are not. We're part of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, so it is housed within UWM.
And I noticed when I was reading an entry and I was like, oh, this is not right, and I wanted to change things, that it's not designed as a wiki. So can you talk about that editorial choice not to make it a wiki? And
yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely one that we have wrestled with over time, because we do want community engagement. We do want people to make suggestions, and so what we settled on. But we also want to maintain this authoritative kind of position as well. That this is definitely not something that's coming down from on high, but something that's been vetted and built and worked through by folks who are trained as historians. So what we settled on was this commenting system that people would, community folks or folks with knowledge on certain topics could then contact us or leave comments, and those things would then help inform the stories and help inform the possibility of either revising or expanding the content of the encyclopedia.
so if a historian wrote an article, do they own that article for life, or do you have a portfolio of articles that you own then as a historian?
They contract with us, yeah. But as a historian, if it's in the encyclopedia, that's part of the encyclopedia. But if a historian then were to then turn around and say, take that research that they did for us and then build an article on top of this, then that would be theirs in whatever capacity they wanted it to be.
Well, how do you determine when it's time to revise or re-edit an article then?
That's a great question. We are, whenever we can get funding to do so. So we're actually waiting on a grant application that we put in this summer. We're not going to find out about it until April. That a big piece of it is editing and revising and expanding the content of the encyclopedia. We want to add about 70 new entries and then revise about 50 of them. So,
question from Michelle Hawkins. What is your favorite entry you've worked on? Personally?
Oh, that is a great question. I love this question because there's so many. I think that the one right now that sticks in my mind is I wrote the outdoor recreation entry, and that was such a huge challenge, right? To think about, A, what is recreation, and B, like what makes outdoor recreation different from indoor recreation. I mean, obviously like the fact that it's out of doors as opposed to, being under a roof or whatever. But then like that encompasses so much. That could be everything from taking a walk to playing organized sports, right? And so I had to somehow, in 3,000 words, encapsulate the entirety of what is outdoor recreation and try to like contextualize it in these larger frameworks, which was a challenge, but also a lot of fun. And I got to explore a lot of fun history of things like, you know, golf and ice skating and curling and all these kinds of fun events and sports.
Some would say drinking, right, in beer gardens.
Right, beer gardens. I think I did also write the beer garden. I wrote all the brewing entries, but also the beer garden and beer hall entries as well. And that was a lot of fun. A lot of fun and research on that one.
Lake Park croquet. We have Jill Pelisek on here too. We've got
Lake Park. Yeah. Yes. And lawn bowling and yeah.
Question from Keith Stakoyak. Has there been any thought of organizing a map that could capture the locations of some of the entries that have a physical location in Milwaukee, thinking like Atlas Obscura? And I guess my tag on to that is any collaboration with the American Geographical Society, which is in your same location.
Yeah, there's been a lot of collaboration with the American Geographical Society. So in fact, Marcy Bidney, who is the head of the AGSL at UWM, is our cartographic editor. So we're working on expanding our map library, but also having some maps drawn through AGSL. And so that's a huge piece of it. In fact, I'm going to pull up something here, and I'm going to share it. There we go. So in fact, there is a piece of the encyclopedia called location search. I don't know if can you see that?
Yeah, we can.
Is that up? Okay, great. Yeah, so this might be part of it, right? So there is actually an interactive. So if you go to the main page and go under entries, and then here's location search. There's an actual map with all the pins in it, and it'll take you right to the entry itself. So there is that capacity right now. I think that there are opportunities for more location-based projects to be built and spun off of this. I'm imagining, in fact, actually like a series of historical walking and driving tours that could be really fascinating, or even like digital, like we could do so digitally through an app that has like specific locations that could be built thematically as well, where people could actually either through a program or download something that will then be able to become mobile, to be able to then help take them from place to place and offer some kind of historical narrative. But that's down the line. I think we're at a place where we need to kind of think through one thing at a time here. So if anybody wants to take that on, please contact me. I would be very happy to talk through that with you.
Can non-licensed historians just write articles and submit them to you, or do you have to be certified by UWM or something?
Well, there isn't much of a certification process. I think that if you would like to write an entry, please contact us or at least express an interest in doing so. Especially in this next round, I think that there's some great opportunities to expand here in the near future. So yeah, I think that you don't have to be. There are actually lots of non-PhD historians and community experts that have written for us. That are really fantastic experts in certain things, and they've written great entries for us.
Great. I guess, do you want to comment on your interesting connection to Solomon Juneau?
Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I am. So as I indicated at the beginning, I wasn't born here, but I have a deep family connection that goes all the way back to the Juneaus. Solomon Juneau is a great uncle of sorts. His brother Peter was my direct descendant, or I'm a direct descendant of Peter Juneau. And and yeah, so apparently, and that goes through, you know, the Darn Eaters and a bunch of other folks. So I have a long family history here. Actually, on both sides of my family. Only one side goes to the Junos, but we have some Irish and German descendants that go back to the early days of the city's history, which has been fun to do some research on, and I think, as Keith said, to try to find their, you know, where they're buried, where they lived, where they, you know, their stomping grounds, you know. So it's definitely, I have a lot of great family connections to this project, and it's, I get caught up in a lot of like the place and thinking about family and its connection to these events that I study. So yeah.
I guess I don't see any more questions. I do have one final question which is, you know, with almost an unlimited amount of topics and things to talk about, how do you prioritize what you write about?
That's a challenge. So I think that so prioritization is often based on need, you know, and I think that like wherever the holes are most glaring, we try to prioritize those pieces first. So for instance, we're working right now with some folks at the Milwaukee Public Library and some other historians in the area to try to shore up our annexation entry and build a table that will kind of show the aerial growth of the city since its charter. And that's turned out to be kind of a big problem, because that data, Alex, as you had indicated, that's everywhere, right? That could be, you know, like there's pieces of it at the state level, there's other pieces of it here at the local level, but then as these annexations happen, you know, that could be all over the place. So we really need to kind of try to figure out where that is. And we have this kind of weird gap between 1974 and the present, where we know how much the city grew, but we don't know why, you know? And so like we're trying to chase that down a bit. And that's become, right at this point, a priority, largely because some of the other things, we're just waiting on the funding, and it's something that we can do right now. So, I mean, it really kind of, it depends upon time, it depends upon how much staff we have. And as you can imagine, the pandemic has really thrown us a curveball with being able to be on campus and being able to access certain resources in person or digitally, and being able to contact folks. So like we're piecing it together right now, and we're hoping that we'll be able to do this in a more concerted effort here as things become a bit more normal, whatever that is now.
I was trying to do some research on the village of Bayside and was shocked to find out they don't keep any records. And I think, you know, people think if it is not 100 years old, it's not worth saving. But what we're living through right now is all history. So
yeah,
people
exactly.
need to save more stuff.
Yeah, yeah, right. And you know, there's great efforts at many different levels to be able to save that kind of stuff. And sadly, you know, you would think that Bayside would do some work to try to hang on to things, but you know, I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully, there's definitely efforts. Actually, Chris Cantwell here at UWM has developed a great digital project documenting the COVID-19 pandemic, and then it's all community driven, so everybody can upload things to that. And it's been a really fantastic resource, and I'm excited to see the work that's going to come out of that collection.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This was terrific, very exciting. Maybe we'll have you back in a few years when it's a gigantic project.
Yeah.
So we'll look forward to that.
Oh, I would love to come back and talk more about this at any time, this and anything. So thank you very much for having me.
Sure. Thank you for speaking to us.